Good afternoon. My name is Linda Kinney. I'm from the MPAA. We're a sponsor for IGF USA Today. And I have the pleasure of introducing our closer today, who has a lot of energy, so it's a good thing. We're at the end of the day and we have an energetic speaker. Nuala O'Connor. She is the new president and CEO of the Center for Democracy and Technology. She's coming up on her 6-month anniversary as CDT. So one thing that's really great about Nuala is her background includes both government and private sector. She spent time at GE and at Amazon and also the Department of Commerce. So we have someone who is involved in both the public interest group and has a vast experience, and I think that's a great thing for that organization. So let's give a round of applause to Nuala.
So I have the unenviable task of standing between you and the bar, which as a good Irish American is not a good thing, right? I shouldn't make Irish jokes, sorry. But I was born there, I'm allowed to do that. I hold dual citizenship. I was asked to be the closer, and I've kind of crowdsourced these remarks in addition to having a terrific team at CDT, including Matthew Shears and Emily Brabus, who is here somewhere, who worked on these. And of course, as usual, you're gonna experience this for the first time, Matthew. I'm going to throw them away and just talk. And some of you will have heard these stories before, so I apologize to you. But I was also encouraged to think of myself not only as the closer, but as the coach sending you out to fight the good fight and get on the field. That was obviously a male suggestion. I think of myself as the benevolent, mother sending her children off to school to say, go get good grades and work hard and be part of the dialogue and be a good classmate. But it's an important time. In the 20 years since CDT was founded, in the almost 20 years since I've been working on internet policy, I cannot think of a more difficult time for the United States and a more important time for the internet and for the end user. At CDT, we are thinking about these issues in terms, and we're really reformulating kind of who we think of ourselves as representatives of and of representing the needs of. We used to think of ourselves as representing the internet, as kind of pompous as that sounds. We represent the tubes and the need to keep the tubes open and keep them free and keep them accessible. But I think of it as an advocate for the people who use the internet, and the expression of yourself online, your digital self, your right to be heard, to express yourself, to contain and control your information. I bristle a little bit about folks who say that it's a property issue. I don't think of data as a property right anymore. I think that's a uniquely American construct. I think of it as part of myself. I really encourage us to think of it in the terms that Latin Americans think of it as habeas data, my data, myself. The things I do online, my self-expression online, that is all a part of me. That is not to say I can't give it to you and share it with you and engage in commerce and do great things online with great companies like the employers I've had, Amazon and GE and others. But we need to start thinking about the work we do as mattering to individuals. And so I was told to be controversial. That was another great piece of advice I got from the organizers, and I like that. That's a lot of fun. I've spoken here before as a government person and had to keep on a script, or as a company representative and tote that party line, but I think we need not only to work harder and work smarter and show up, as Steve Del Bianco said, but I think we need to be a little more creative. I think we need to innovate in our policy solutions. We've just spent the last few days at CDT working on our net neutrality comments, and the thing I keep exhorting our team to do is to come up with something new. We in Washington have gotten a little staid in our arguments about not just net neutrality, but a lot of these internet issues, including privacy. Somebody on my team said to me, I am just bored of privacy, and I have to confess it was someone who works on privacy. And I said, I kind of understand that, because it seems like there is nothing new under the sun. We keep talking about innovation, but we're not doing it ourselves. We're not innovating in our thoughts. We're not thinking creatively about new solutions. I think now is the time. Now is the time to not only show up and be creative and make our voices heard, but to come up with something new. come up with something new that represents not only the voice of the party that we represent, whether it's government or companies or industry, but that actually represents the voices that are yet to be heard, the end user that is yet to be online. I was just talking with your boss, Senator Dodd at MPA this morning, and he was talking about a futurist at Stanford. I can't remember the professor's name, and I thought, this is wonderful. Senator Dodd and I both have children about the same age, and people always ask me, why did you go to CDT? Why did you leave Amazon? You know, why this fairly significant career change? Although I've always said, I'm working on the same issues, just from a different part of the circle. But there are two stories. One is the kind of obvious, which is, as the first chief privacy officer at the Department of Homeland Security, I felt like I had something to say about the surveillance issue. And we've got to do some work on that surveillance issue here in the United States, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the second story, and some of you have heard it already, so apologies for that, involves my 6-year-old daughter, Maggie. Maggie just finished her first grade year at a girls' Catholic school here in Bethesda, and she was asking me that question, Mommy, what's your new job all about? And I said, you know, and why do you like technology, Mommy, so much? Like, what's the big deal about this computers? I mean, this is a child who's grown up with computers and all over the house. We have more computers and more screens and fewer TVs than you would ever imagine. And I said, you know, Maggie, when I was a first grader at a Catholic school in New York City, I remember vividly reading a book that said, someday there will be telephones and you'll be able to see the person you're talking to while you're on the phone. And it had a picture. I remember this vividly, and the textbook was probably way out of date even then a long, long time ago, many, many decades ago. And it had what looked like a small desktop computer with a screen and a little telephone handle attached to it, and the person was sitting there looking at the screen, talking on the phone. And I thought, this is amazing. And I was, 6 years old, and again, it was a long, long time ago. But I thought, gosh, what a change, especially since we had just moved from Ireland, and phone calls to Ireland meant you'd have this long delay, and you could never hear, and there were many second delay before the person responded. And I thought, how wonderful for my family to be able to see the people that, we go for years without seeing, and wouldn't that be neat? And I was trying to explain to her the concept of, well, that was my future, honey, and look at the iPhone, and I FaceTime you from work, and isn't this great, and this is my future. And she said the ultimate question, Mommy, what does my future look like? And I thought, that is why I do this job. Because the rules that we put in place now are going to affect generations of internet users. And if we do it right, it will improve the lives of billions of people. And if we do it wrong, I only have one phrase that comes to mind, and it's, there's hell to pay. There is a loss of generations of ingenuity and innovation and intelligence and capital and growth and opportunity for the underserved. I'm not necessarily worried about the great big companies and the brand names and the wonderful work and the great innovation that's already happened. I'm worried about what is yet to come and the missed opportunity. So, Mommy, what does my future look like? And that was some of the conversation we were having with Senator Dodd, because he was talking about the world that his children live in will look profoundly different, will feel profoundly different. I said to my daughter, you'll get up in the morning and the walls will be screens. And you will say out loud, computer, what's on my schedule today? Or make me breakfast, or where did I leave my car keys, or whatever it will look like. You will live in a world where the computer will be something you talk to and something you touch and something you look at. It will be embedded in every aspect of your life. Your information, as a result, will be communicated across the Internet of Things, whatever phrase you want to call it. We call it technology in daily life. It is about the embedding of infrastructure, of technology in the ordinary world, and the incredible opportunities. We've been talking about some of them. The opportunities for big data to be used in healthcare, in improving educational outcomes, in energy efficiency, in improving the environment. The opportunities are certainly limitless, but the risks are certainly equally huge, because the loss of privacy, the loss of the digital self, the loss of boundaries between the individual and the company, the individual and the government, the individual and each other, the potential to reshape our families, our societies, our communities in a way that is good or that is bad. We are at the pivot point about how we negotiate these boundaries and how we share this information or do not share this information or put rules in place, legitimate rules that let companies thrive, that let governments thrive, but that respect the value of the individual above all. And that's the work that we're doing. We can use all the great jargon that we all do here in Washington and in the government and in the private sector, but at the end of the day, this comes down to people, this comes down to growth, it comes down to global norms, and how we get it done. And the last thought I would leave you, what's my advice, what's my thought as we go into Istanbul and as we go forward? We are playing hurt. And life always imitates art to me. I am standing here before you with a broken toe. This is the only thing you're all going to remember from this remark is that I have a broken toe. I am not supposed to be wearing heels. I am far too vain to show up wearing flats, which I've worn for the last 6 weeks. But I am playing injured, and so should you. And what I mean by that is the U.S. has taken a hit. There is no denying that the NSA revelations have damaged our credibility and our standing on the surveillance issue. There is no doubt about that. There is no doubt about the fact that it has damaged sales for US-based multinationals, that it has damaged our credibility in the conversation around the relationship of the individual to the government. There is no question. That's the fact. We have to go forward and be in the conversation nevertheless. We should be there, we should be present, we should be leading in our thinking and our innovation around governance, and we should be doing so with the humility and the awareness that no, we are not perfect, but we are going to show up and we are going to try again and we're going to get this right. And we're going to get this right because we now have an obligation. Whether you can sit and bemoan the fact that other countries are doing it too, or why is this so big a deal, or whatever your attitude is, the facts are the facts, the global reaction is understandably not good. So I say we take it on full force and we engage in that conversation and we say, yes, we're not happy either. We're going to figure out a way. We're going to figure out a way to keep our countries safe and also to limit the intrusion on the individual, on the digital self. And we're going to engage in that dialogue about how to create the global norms that make sense from the national security standpoint, but that make sense for the individual. And that we want to see those rules not only in place for our country, but for the rest of the world as well. And again, my second thought is to be more creative, to innovate not only in our technology, but in our policy solutions. I love Marilyn's comment, and it's something we say at CDT all the time, that we need the voice of the technologist, of the scientist, of the engineer in this dialogue. We have a team at CDT run by our Chief Technology Officer, and we're growing our pipeline of technology expertise, not only here, but in Europe and in Silicon Valley. And I would say go forward, innovate, be creative, and show up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuala. So we have a little time for questions for Nuala. I think I'll kick it off with a question that I have that I've been thinking a lot about, which is, one of the things about the multi-stakeholder process, we've heard a lot today about the GAC, the role of governments, how that can be improved. We also have the business community, and they work together. But how can organizations like yours impact the multi-stakeholder process? Because I feel like sometimes these public interest groups are very splintered and fragmented. There's multiple voices. How do they function productively and efficiently in a process like this, and what do you think they have to offer in Istanbul?
Well, that is a great question, and I have to start with the somewhat offhanded response that I've always bristled at the term civil society because I spent 7 years in the government and more than 10 years in the private sector, and I've always thought of myself as very civil, right? So what's the deal? You don't get the only title of civil society, but it is true. It is hard. I hear, and I would put this charge out to my friends in civil society, and I'm so glad to see great organizations like Public Knowledge, and there are a couple others, I'm sorry, that were mentioned. Delighted to see representation from the great organizations we have here in DC and elsewhere. Yes, I realize we are thinly staffed, and yes, I realize budgets are tight. I would also say things weren't that rosy in the private sector. Let me tell you, I lived through 7.5 years at GE, through the ups and the downs. I remember at DoubleClick, we had, we started with 50 employees, we went to 5,000, we were back down to 500 by the time I left. So things are not always as easy in the others, the grass is always greener no matter where you are. Folks in the time I was in the government felt like they had such stable jobs, and then suddenly there were layoffs. So things are hard. Things are hard all over. What we do need, and I think your question really indicates, is coordination and communication between all the sectors. We can start with ourselves across the advocacy groups, and there are, again, incredibly talented, terrifically educated, thoughtful resources in the advocacy community. I think our little takeaway is divide and conquer. We've got experts in certain groups that are privacy experts or security experts or surveillance experts, and we are getting better. I'll tell you, this should strike fear in the hearts of some of you, that we are getting better at our internal coordination and our use of social media and our collaborative voice. But it is hard. It is a hard thing to do the international work because it is costly. So I would remind all of you that we are always willing to accept donations at www.cdt.org, and you can come see me later. I'm happy to help you find that link. But we are committed, in all seriousness. We at CDT are committed. It is an incredibly important part of our growth trajectory to not only look at these issues as global issues, but to staff them globally, to staff them in country, and to really show up and be present.
Talk so much I forgot I need a microphone. During the human rights session, Deborah Brown of the Association for Progressive Communications, in talking about the surveillance human rights issue, said, some good can come, I'm paraphrasing her words, because more and more governments are competing to become role models in terms of digital rights. And I just wondered what you thought of that sort of rethinking of this. The good is starting to come out of this.
I am the eternal, first of all, did everyone hear the question? I want to make sure that the opportunity to compete for quality human and digital rights among governments. I am the eternal optimist, which is probably good in my role. I actually think much good has come out of it already in the United States. Simply by having the conversation, we are more aware, we are more thoughtful. And again, I would put the onus on us in civil society and all of us to think creatively about the solutions. The answer is not no law enforcement or no national security. The answer is thoughtful, targeted, well planned out and really legitimate use of technology and resources to further legitimate and well-supported public policy ends. I think the solution, the challenge has existed because of technology. The solution can lie in technology as well. We need thoughtful use of, again, innovative, creative uses of technology to create limited solutions in that area. In the global race to the top on digital rights, I hope that's true. That's not what I'm seeing. I'm going to be honest with you. I see a lot of dialogue around, well, the US does it, so why can't we? Or, they do it, so why can't we in any direction? But I do think it has elevated the issue, the awareness of the use of technological tools, of big data sets, and of the blurring of the lines between data collected in the private sector for legitimate private sector use across the transom to government actors. It's been something that's been growing and that we've been aware of, but I think it has really highlighted the public dialogue in the United States, and we're now seeing that dialogue just in the last couple of days. There is a proposal for a PCLOB-like oversight board in the United Kingdom. We are in contact with advocacy groups on this issue all around the world. So I do think that the dialogue is there. It is elevated. I can't say that I see people competing for, come move to this country. We'll protect your digital rights better than the U.S. does. But there is communication, and I think it's the first step.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of my colleagues from this country who are engineers on some bilaterals in the last few years with China and Russia. It's been very exciting work as an engineer to work on. And I'm always confident that when we go through difficult things like the NSA issue, that eventually we have a good chance of coming out better. And so they're surprised often that I'm open talking about it because our system allows for the transparency and such. I'm asking you to comment on, there's something missing when you talk about democracy and technology. And I think that there is often not enough knowledge, even in this generation that I'm from, about our founding fathers and what they really emphasized. And if you look at what the founding fathers emphasized, there was a lot of other things besides democracy. And I think we've seen a failure of something that was tried in Russia, that they think they tried the American recipe. It didn't work over there. I don't think they really did because we didn't emphasize all the right things. I think we've seen the same thing in other countries in the Middle East. And also we have a lot of people fleeing South America now, primarily because of corruption. And I'll just make one quote. There's dozens of quotes from our founding fathers. This one's from Benjamin Franklin, and I'm from Pennsylvania. But he said that only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. And so I just ask, given that you're at this nexus of technology and democracy, how do you find this this third ingredient, or this third point of emphasis that our founding fathers emphasize? Is it something that comes up often, or do you find yourself introducing it in your work? Thank you.
That is a beautiful comment. Thank you so much. I think it reminds me of the conversation we're having internally at CDT at our 20th anniversary, is recommitting to our core values. And something we hear in the dialogue in the US all the time is, oh, the technology has changed the world so much, the law needs to change. I'm actually I don't want to say I'm a strict constructionist, but I think that it's not actually so much that the law has changed, that we need to be vigilant about staying true to those core values and being really aware of the application of our fundamental truths, our fundamental values to new technologies and to new ways of engaging with the world. That is validated by the recent Supreme Court case in Riley that Justice Roberts, in fact, wrote that this is not an issue of a need to change the law. This is an issue of applying old law to new scenarios. So I've come full circle on thinking our title was a little kind of old and serious, and to actually really loving it, because the three words, Center for Democracy and Technology, we are a center, not a center kind of politically our organization, but rather we believe we are a center in the dialogue. We want to be a convener of government, of advocacy, of the corporate community to create solutions around these issues. We believe in democratic values. They may articulate themselves differently in different parts of the world, but there are core truths and fundamental truths around the rights of the individual that I think we can be advocates for no matter where in the world they are, while respectful of the geographic and regional and cultural differences. And we are also advocates of technology. We believe it brings great things to the human race, and we want to see those values embedded in new technologies, and we want to see new technology be an enabler of democratic values as well.
Thank you very much, Nuala. Really appreciate your spending time with us today. I think I'm going to close. We're going to wrap up shortly, and I'm sure everybody's ready to go after a long day of speeches and presentations, but I think there's a lot of interesting information that came out today. I love the fact that we're going to Istanbul, to the country that banned Twitter. There's just such an irony there. In fact, the government, I think, issued a tweet shortly afterwards saying, Twitter banned to protect human rights. There's a lot of irony there. And then the immediate response to that was a request, an ask of the government, well, what DNS settings did you use to get around the ban? So I was like, that's appropriate for our audience. So thank you very much for coming. I'd like to also thank our hosts, the ISOC and GW, particularly Susan Aronson, who definitely needs to go back to being an academic now that she's been an organizer for the last several weeks, and all of her hard work has paid off, as well as all the panelists and certainly the volunteers and the interns who spent all day working and helping and making this run smoothly. So I think David may have a few words to wrap up. David?
Sure. I'm going to keep this real short. We had a great day. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you for everybody who spoke. Thank you to everybody who commented and asked questions. The reception's upstairs. Let's go. And thanks to all the people who work so hard on the administrative committee and the steering committee.